If you call your janitor daddy one more time, I swear I'll make sure you never see him again. That was the first thing I heard when my daughter's voice came
I need
through
to
the
tell you
speaker,
something.
small and shaking,
Wait,
while her
we
mother's
have
new
a
boyfriend laughed in
situation.
the
What do
background.
you mean what's doing?
Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. I was standing alone in the empty school hallway when that sentence hit me, the mop bucket squeaking beside me. My phone pressed so hard to my ear my fingers went numb. The night shift is usually just humming lights, the smell of bleach, and my thoughts. But that night it was my daughter's silence on the other end that made everything feel wrong. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop. She'd called me by accident, or maybe on purpose. I still don't know. But the line connected and I froze when I heard his voice, not hers. "Oh, look, she's crying." The man laughed, his tone slick and amused, like cruelty was a joke between friends. "Violet, I'm serious," he said, his voice dropping low. "You keep running to that poor janitor, and I'll talk to your mom about changing the custody agreement. You think a judge is going to pick a mop over a man with real money?" I heard a muffled sound, my daughter trying to say something, her words swallowed by their living room noise, a TV in the background, Brooke's voice somewhere farther away. Then my ex-wife's new boyfriend came closer to the phone, and his words were suddenly crystal clear in my ear. "You still there, sweetheart?" he said to my daughter, his tone syrup-sweet and fake. "You know your dad doesn't have anything, right? He cleans toilets. That's his whole life. You keep clinging to him, and you'll end up just as pathetic." I leaned my shoulder against a locker and stared at my reflection in the small, dented metal, my faded name tag catching the light. Mason. Janitor Mason. That's all anybody at this school saw, and that's all he thought I'd ever be. I didn't say a word. My thumb hovered over the screen, tempted to hang up, to burst in, to do something. But instead I did what years of training had drilled into my bones. I listened. People think anger is yelling, smashing, throwing punches, but real anger can be quiet, cold, the kind that makes every detail sharpen instead of blur. I noticed everything. The echo of their hardwood under his steps, the way Violet's breathing hitched, the slight slur in his voice like he'd had something to drink. "Please don't talk about my dad like that." Violet's voice finally slipped through, small and breaking. "He's not pathetic." I closed my eyes, because even after everything, she still defended me in a house where my name was treated like dirt. "Oh, come on," he snapped, the charm gone. "Wake up. Your mom left him for a reason. You want college? You want a car? You want a decent life? That mop isn't buying you any of that." He let out a breath, and then his tone turned darker. "You keep running your mouth about him. I'll make sure you don't see him at all. I'll have your mom file to cut his weekends. And trust me, judges listen to men like me, not custodial staff." There it was. Not just the insult, not just the class joke, an actual threat, aimed right at the one person I stayed in this town for, the one person I went from clearing rooms to cleaning hallways for. He was threatening my daughter's time with me like it was some chore chart he could erase with a pen stroke. My hand moved almost on its own. I tapped the side button and watched the little red dot appear on my screen, recording. The mop water had gone still. The entire hallway felt like it was holding its breath with me as his voice poured through the speaker. "Hunter, stop." Brooke's voice finally cut in, anxious and thin. "You're scaring her." "Good," he shot back. "Fear keeps kids in line. Someone's got to be the adult here." "That guy sure isn't." Brooke didn't say my name, but I felt it there, hanging between them like something dirty. I thought about all the times she'd rolled her eyes at my job after the divorce, called it temporary, told me I was wasting my potential scrubbing floors. She didn't know the real reason I chose this work, this town, this nothing-looking life instead of the offers that came after I hung up my uniform. Violet did. She knew enough to understand that her dad had seen things he didn't want to see again, that he'd done enough important work to last 10 lifetimes. "Mom," Violet whispered, and I heard it like she was right next to me. "I want to talk to Dad." There was a shuffle, a protest, Hunter muttering something about boundaries and respect, and then the line went quiet. For a second I thought the call had dropped, but then a soft click came through, and her voice was suddenly clearer. "Dad?" she whispered. "Can you hear me?" My chest clenched. "Yeah, baby. I'm here." There was a pause, like she was weighing what she was allowed to say against what she needed to. "I didn't mean to call," she said, voice trembling. I hit your name by accident when they were yelling, and then I just left it. I'm sorry." I swallowed. "Don't be sorry." I tried to keep my voice calm, neutral, the way you talk when someone has a gun pointed at them. Even if this time the weapon was money and paperwork, not metal. "Is he still there?" I asked. "Yeah," she breathed. "He's mad. He said if I keep defending you, he's gonna make sure I don't see you for a long time." My hand tightened around the phone, knuckles going white. "Okay, I want you to listen to me very carefully, Violet." I walked slowly down the hallway, the wheels of the mop bucket squeaking like they were trying not to make a sound. "You do not argue with him," I said softly. "Do you hear me? You don't yell, you don't push back. You just stay calm, you say okay, and you call me later when you're alone." "But that's not fair," she whispered, and it cracked something in me I'd been holding together for years. "He keeps saying you're nothing, that you're just a janitor." I stopped in front of the darkened classroom where her picture was taped to my locker inside, the one from when she was 8, and still thought I could fix anything. "Violet," I said, my voice low, steady. "I'd rather be a janitor than the kind of man who uses a kid as a weapon. You understand?" She sniffled. "Yeah." Behind her, I could hear Hunter's voice rising again, muffled but sharp, and Brooke trying to smooth it over like she always did. "I gotta go," Violet whispered quickly. "Please don't get mad. Please don't do anything crazy." That line stung more than anything he'd said, because that wasn't her talking. That was them. Their version of me, the unstable ex-husband with some vague military issues. "I'm not going to do anything crazy," I said quietly. "I'm just going to take care of you. That's my job." Okay, she breathed, and then the line clicked dead. The hallway went silent again, just the buzz of the lights and the distant hum of the boiler. I stood there for a long time, phone still in my hand, listening to nothing. Then I opened the recording and played it back from the beginning. "If you call your janitor daddy one more time, I swear I'll make sure you never see him again." His voice echoed through the empty school, bouncing off lockers and glass, turning my workplace into a witness. Hearing it a second time didn't make it hurt less, but it did something else. It made it real, solid, something I could hold up instead of just swallow. I saved the file, then backed it up to the cloud, then to another folder, years of habits kicking in, duplicate, secure, anticipate what could go wrong. On the surface, I was just a tired middle-aged man in a faded polo, pushing a mop around a public school. But under that, under the calloused hands and the quiet routine, there was someone Hunter had never met and thought he never would. He thought he was threatening a janitor. He thought all I had was a paycheck that barely covered rent and a heart too soft to fight back. He had no idea who he'd just chosen to go to war with. When people ask me when my marriage really ended, I don't tell them about the day Brooke moved her things out. It ended years earlier, the first time she looked at my uniform and sighed like it was a phase I was supposed to grow out of. Back then, before the mop and the name tag, I wore a different kind of uniform. Brooke used to trace the patches on my sleeve with her fingers, proud in a way that made me uncomfortable, like she loved the idea of me more than the man standing in front of her. She'd tell people at barbecues, "Mason can't talk about what he does," with that half-smile, and they'd nod like it was all cool mystery and no blood. Then Violet was born, and everything shifted. Suddenly the danger wasn't just mine. It was hers, a shadow hanging over a crib. I still remember standing in that hospital room, looking at this tiny human who had my eyes, and thinking, if I don't walk away now, one day she gets a folded flag instead of a father. Leaving the teams wasn't a clean cut. Guys like me don't just flip a switch. You go from doors being kicked in to not knowing how to sit on a couch without staring at exits. But I did it anyway. Brooke said she understood at first, said she wanted me home, wanted normal. Normal didn't look the way she thought it would. The private security offer I turned down would have put us in a new house, nicer cars, the kind of life you post about. Instead, I chose something small and steady, something that let me be there for school plays and dentist appointments. I took a maintenance job at a warehouse. Then when the opening came up, I moved to the school janitor position. You're kidding, right? I still remember the first time she said it, holding the job posting in her hand like it smelled bad. A janitor, Mason? With your skills? You could be making 3 times that. I'll be home for dinner, I told her. I'll be in the same town as Violet. That's the point. She didn't shout. Brooke's never been big on shouting. Her anger comes in quieter forms. Tight smiles, longer silences, questions that sound polite but cut deep. Okay, she said that night, stirring a pot on the stove. If that's what you want. It took years for me to understand that what she meant was, that's not what I want. The money got tighter, and with every bill, every broken appliance, every missed vacation, I watched her respect for me shrink. She'd say stuff like, I just never thought this would be our life, staring at our secondhand furniture, at my boots by the door. I try to make a joke, say, at least we're safe, but she didn't care about the kind of danger I'd pulled us away from. Only the kind other people could see. When she met Hunter, I didn't know his name yet. I just knew she started staying late at work more often, coming home in clothes that smelled like a bar, not an office. She'd talk about a client who was really smart with investments, someone who understood what it meant to push for more. I was too tired and too trusting to put it together at first. I told myself she deserved friends, that I was the one who'd pulled us into this smaller life. The least I could do was not question the tiny pieces of joy she found in it. The night she admitted it, Violet was at a sleepover. The house was too quiet, like it already knew what was coming. Brooke sat across from me at our wobbly kitchen table, fingers wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking from. I can't do this anymore, she said. I'd heard that phrase shouted by people under fire, whispered by men shaking after missions, but in my kitchen it felt worse. What does that mean? I asked, even though I already knew. She looked me straight in the eye, and I saw more resentment than sadness there. It means I'm tired of scraping by, she said. Tired of you acting like this. Small life is noble. You had options, Mason, but you chose to be a janitor. I chose to be here, I said quietly. With you. With our daughter. She shook her head, a humorless laugh slipping out. Don't turn this into some hero story. You didn't walk away from that job for us. You walked away because you couldn't handle it anymore. That one landed. Not because it was true, but because every man who's seen what I've seen has asked himself the same question in the middle of the night. Is there someone else? I asked. She hesitated just long enough. His name is Hunter, she said finally. He owns property. He invests. He thinks big. And does he know you have a husband who cleans classrooms for a living? I asked. Her jaw tightened. He knows I married a man who's settled, she said. I'm done settling. The divorce that followed wasn't loud. It was paperwork and meetings and the slow death of routines. 2 sets of keys, 2 sets of dishes, 2 different addresses on the forms at Violet's school. What I didn't expect was how quickly my role as a father would be put on trial. In mediation, they didn't ask about the nights I stayed up with Violet when she was sick, or the school projects we built together on the living room floor. They asked about my income, about my history of deployment, about whether I ever raised my voice or had difficulty processing stress. Brooke's lawyer smiled the whole time, a sharp, professional smile. He's a good man, she said sweetly, but he has unresolved issues from his past. And with his job situation being so unstable, we just think Violet needs a more consistent environment. Unstable. I'd risked my life for a government that stamped honorable on my discharge. But in that office I was just a guy with a mop and a file they could turn into a threat. My attorney, cheap, overworked, but at least present, leaned toward me and whispered, if you push for 50-50, this could get ugly. They're hinting at using your service record against you. I'm not a danger to my kid, I said. I know, he replied. But court isn't about what's true. It's about what you can prove and what they can spin. In the end, I agreed to a schedule that felt like a bad compromise. Every other weekend, some holidays, a few dinners that depended on Brooke's mood and Hunter's calendar. They called it liberal visitation, like I should be grateful. When the judge read the order, he didn't look at me like a monster or a hero, just another man in a too small shirt, squeezed into a chair that wasn't built for him. Mr. Mason, he said, this arrangement is in the best interest of the child. I nodded, because what else was there to do? I shook Brooke's hand in the hallway afterward, because that's what civil people are supposed to do. She wouldn't quite meet my eyes. Hunter was there that day too, leaning against the wall in a suit that fit better than it should have. He didn't shake my hand. He just gave me a small, smug nod, like we'd just finished a business deal and he'd gotten the better end of it. Congrats, he said under his breath as Brooke walked ahead. You still get to see her. That's more than some guys get. I looked at him, really looked, and something in his eyes felt familiar, not because I knew him, but because I knew the type. Entitled, careless. The kind of man who thinks he's untouchable because the system tends to nod along when he talks. I said nothing then, just like I said nothing in the school hallway. Years later, listening to him threaten my daughter over the phone. But silence is not the same thing as surrender. That night, after replaying the recording until my head ached, I opened a blank note in my phone and started to write everything down. Dates, times, comments Hunter had made, ways Violet's behavior had changed. Not as a soldier planning an op, at least not exactly. As a father who'd already lost half of his daughter's childhood on paper and wasn't about to let a stranger erase the rest. I didn't know it yet, but that quiet little file of notes and voice clips would become the first weapon I ever picked up that didn't make a sound. The next time I saw Violet, she looked older in a way that had nothing to do with time. Same hoodie, same messy ponytail, but her eyes did that thing where they kept scanning the room, like she was waiting for someone to walk in and ruin it. We were at the diner we always go to on my weekends, the one with sticky menus and a waitress who still calls me Han. I used to hate that. Now I cling to it, because it's one of the only places where I'm not the janitor or the ex. You okay? I asked once the waitress walked away with our order. You seem wired. She shrugged, tracing a line in the condensation on her water glass. I'm fine. The word was automatic, practiced. I'd heard that same tone from guys fresh back from bad missions. I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, until you press just enough and the wall cracks. Violet, I said gently, you know you don't have to protect my feelings, right? If something's going on over there, I need to know. Her jaw tightened. She glanced toward the door, even though Brooke and Hunter were long gone. They hate when I talk about you, she said finally. Like, hate it. I leaned back, trying to keep my voice even. Who does? Your mom or Hunter? She gave me a look that said, come on. You know the answer. Both, she said. But he's worse. How? She picked at the paper straw wrapper, tearing it into smaller and smaller pieces. He checks my phone. At night, sometimes. He says he's just making sure I'm not talking to weird guys, but he always scrolls down to your name and just stares at it. Her shoulders hunched a little. He tells Mom I'm too attached to you, that it's unhealthy. My fingers curled against the table, nails digging into my palm. Does he ever touch you? Grab you? Anything like that? Her head snapped up. No, not like that. He just controls everything. What I wear when we go somewhere nice, who I follow, what I post. If I use the word dad too much online, he says it makes him look like the outsider. A bitter laugh slipped out of me before I could stop it. He is the outsider. Try telling him that, she muttered. The waitress came by and dropped our burgers, oblivious to the landmine sitting between us. We both went quiet until she walked away again. What about the threats? I asked softly. What he said on the phone the other night, about making sure you don't see me. Her throat worked as she swallowed. He says stuff like that when he's mad. That he'll take care of it in court. that judges like stable households with real income. He thinks mom should have pushed harder in the divorce. So he talks about court a lot? She nodded. He says things like, "You think that visitation schedule is permanent? Paper can be changed." And he always says it when mom's in the room, like he's daring her to argue. My mind was already moving, pieces clicking together. Threats, control, money, image. The kind of man who thinks the system is another toy to play with. I pulled my phone out and set it on the table between us. "Listen to me," I said. "I need you to do something for me, okay? But only if you feel safe doing it." Her eyes narrowed a little. "Okay." I opened the voice memo app and showed her the screen. "You know how that call connected by accident the other night?" I said. "That was scary. But it also showed me something. When people like Hunter feel untouchable, they get sloppy. They say things they shouldn't say out loud." "And you want me to record him?" she asked. Only hearing it out loud did I realize how heavy that was to put on a kid. I hated that I was even thinking it. But I also knew what happened when you walked into any kind of court with nothing but feelings versus walking in with proof. "I want you to have this," I said instead. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out an old phone, one I hadn't used in years but kept around. "This doesn't have a number, no service. But it still works on Wi-Fi, and it can record. You keep this in your backpack or your jacket, wherever you feel comfortable. If he ever starts in on you about me, or threatens you, and you feel like you can do it safely, you hit this button and let it run." She stared at the phone like it was something radioactive. "What if he finds it? Then you tell him it's mine," I said. "That you grabbed it by accident or whatever. You don't lie about where it came from. If anyone's going to get heat for it, it's going to be me, not you." She bit her lip. "Isn't this sneaky?" "Yes," I said. "It is. I don't like sneaky. But I like the idea of him scaring you for free even less." She slid the phone closer, turning it over in her hands. "What are you going to do with it?" "Right now? Nothing," I said. "I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing, seeing you, working, keeping my head down. But if he keeps pushing, if he tries to mess with our time again, I want the truth on our side. Not just stories that get argued away." She looked at me for a long time, searching my face. "Mom says you can be intense. That you used to do. Dangerous stuff." "Your mom's not wrong," I said quietly. "But I'm not using that on him. I'm done with that part of my life." "Then why does he talk about it so much?" she asked. I froze. "What do you mean?" She shrugged, playing with the edge of her napkin. "He asks weird questions. Like, what did your dad really do before he started mopping floors? Or, did he ever kill anybody? He jokes about it, but it doesn't feel like a joke." My stomach went cold. "Did you tell him anything?" "I don't know anything," she said. "You never talk about it." "I just told him you were in the army or something." He got this look on his face and said, "Figures. Figures." Like something had just clicked into place for him. "Has he ever said any specific words?" I asked. "Like a unit, or a base, or anything that sounds like it belongs in a war movie?" She squinted, thinking. "One time he asked if you were one of those special guys, like, what did he say? Delta? Delta Force." The noise of the diner faded. Just that one word, hanging between us like a grenade pin pulled halfway. I kept my face as neutral as I could. "What did you say?" "I said I didn't know," she replied. And then he laughed and said, "Yeah, if he was, he wouldn't be cleaning up spilled milk in a cafeteria." On the outside, I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Inside, alarms were blazing. I had never told Brooke the name of my unit. Not once. Not in a fight. Not in bed. Not drunk. Not ever. "Dad," Violet's voice cut through my thoughts. "Are you mad at you?" "Never," I said. "But I'm paying attention now." She slipped the old phone into her hoodie pocket like she'd already made up her mind. "I'll be careful," she said. "I promise." I nodded, but my appetite was gone. Something about Hunter's questions, his sudden interest in the exact thing I'd spent years burying, didn't feel like ego anymore. They felt like reconnaissance. Later that night, after I dropped her off and watched her walk up the sidewalk to that nicer house, I sat in my car longer than usual. Lights were on in the front room. A shadow that looked like Hunter moved past the window, gesturing big, animated, like he was telling a story he wanted the world to believe. I pulled out my phone, opened the Notes app, and added a new line under the growing list. Hunter used the word Delta Force. I stared at it for a long time, then typed one more sentence. He's not just mocking me anymore. He's looking for who I used to be. The week after Violet told me he'd used the word Delta, the air around every pickup and drop-off felt different, like the temperature had dropped even when the sun was out. Our next exchange was in the school parking lot, Saturday morning, too early for anything dramatic. Parents stood around with coffee cups, kids weaving between cars, backpacks half-zipped. I liked that time usually. It was one of the only places I got to look like any other dad waiting for his kid. I got there early, out of habit. Old training never left me. I always preferred to be on the ground first, see the angles, watch the flow. I leaned against my dented car, hands in the pockets of my jacket, eyes on the main entrance. Violet came out a few minutes later, walking beside Brooke and Hunter. She saw me and her face did that quick light up it always did, but she pushed it down fast, like she'd been practicing not to show it. "Hey, kiddo," I called, pushing off the car. She moved toward me, but Hunter's hand landed on her shoulder for just a second, like a reminder. Then he smiled wide and loud, voice carrying more than it needed to. "There he is," he announced, like I was late to my own party. Man of the hour. Custodial king himself. A couple of parents glanced over. Some recognized me from the hallways inside. The guy who swept up their kids spilled chips. I felt their eyes skim my face, then drop to my worn boots, then away. I kept my expression calm. "Morning." Brooke gave me a tight-lipped smile. "Hi, Mason." Violet stepped into my space and hugged me quick, like she wasn't sure how much time she was allowed. I hugged her back, steady, breathing in that shampoo that still smelled like when she was smaller. "Got your stuff?" I asked. She nodded, lifting her backpack. "Yeah." Hunter looked around at the other parents, then back at me. "You heading straight to work after this?" he asked, his tone friendly and loud enough for anyone passing to hear. "Not today," I said. "Just spending time with my daughter." He laughed. "Must be nice, getting all that time off. Guess when you're on the night shift with a mop, the weekends are wide open, huh?" I felt Violet flinch beside me. "Hunter," Brooke said quietly, but she didn't really put weight behind it. More like she was checking a box. I could feel my jaw wanting to clench, but I didn't let it. I slid my hand in my pocket instead and tapped the side of my phone. The screen stayed dark, but I knew from practice. One press, then another. The little vibration confirmed it. I was recording. "Work is work," I said. "World needs clean floors too." He smirked. "Sure. Just saying, Violet could have a different life, you know? Bigger. I've been talking to your mom about maybe getting her into a private school. Somewhere that fits her potential." He looked at her, then back at me, eyes glittering. Somewhere people's dads aren't the help. It got quieter around us. Conversations shifted, a couple of heads turned. Parents love a scene, as long as it's not theirs. Violet's cheeks flushed. "Can we go, Dad?" she whispered. "In a second," I said, keeping my voice level. I turned to Hunter. "I don't mind what you think of me, but you don't get to talk like that about her in front of other people." "Oh," he said, raising his brows, stepping a little closer. "What are you gonna do, tough guy? Mop me to death?" A laugh broke out from somewhere behind him. That was what he wanted, an audience. He took one more step in, close enough that I could smell his cologne over the exhaust fumes and asphalt. "Go ahead," he murmured, low enough only I could hear now. "Raise your voice. Put a hand on me. Make a scene. I dare you. You so much as breathe wrong, and I call the cops and the court. Tell them you snapped." I could see it, clear as a mission brief. Him flopping back dramatically, Brooke gasping, someone filming. The whole story shrunk to a 10-second clip of unhinged ex-husband attacks successful fiancé. "Hunter, stop," Brooke said, a little sharper this time. "Not here." He straightened, switching the volume back on. "I'm just saying, it's about stability." he said, now addressing no one and everyone. Judges care about that. Kids need role models who think beyond minimum wage. I let the moment hang for a beat, felt every muscle in my body wanting to respond the way it was trained to, direct, decisive, overwhelming. Instead, I took a small step back, putting just a sliver more space between us. You done? I asked. He blinked, thrown off by the lack of reaction. Because Violet and I have plans, I added. And I'm not wasting her weekend arguing in a parking lot. I turned to Brooke, made sure I looked only at her. Is there anything I need to know? Any changes to her schedule, appointments, anything like that? She seemed almost relieved to be addressed like a co-parent instead of a bystander. No, she said. Just have her back by 7 tomorrow. Please. I will, I said. I opened the passenger door for Violet. She climbed in, clutching her backpack like a shield. I circled around to my side, feeling Hunter's stare burning into the back of my neck. Right before I got in, he called out, "Hey, Mason." I looked over the roof of the car. He spread his arms a little. Enjoy your visit. Never know how many of those you've got left. It was a threat and a promise wrapped in a smirk. I held his gaze for a second. You're right, I said. You never do. Then I got in the car and drove away. We didn't talk much at first. Violet picked at the skin around her thumb, a habit she'd had since she was a kid. I kept my eyes on the road, forcing my breathing to stay steady. You okay? I asked after a few miles. She shook her head. I hate when he does that. He knows people are watching. He likes it. I know, I said. And I need you to promise me something. She glanced over. No matter what he says about me, about my job, my past, anything, you don't feel responsible for defending me, okay? That's not your job. That's mine. Her eyes filled, but she blinked the tears back. He keeps making it my job. I'm going to change that, I said quietly. That night, after I dropped her off and went back to my apartment, I plugged my phone in and sank onto the edge of the bed. The recording app sat there on the screen, little waveform icon waiting. I hit play, hearing it again. The mockery, the baiting, the specific references to court and role models did something different this time. The first recording, on the call, had scared me. This one made me angry in a cleaner way. This wasn't just a bully with money. This was someone who thought he could build a whole case out of humiliation. I saved the file, backed it up twice, then opened my browser. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a second. I'd avoided this step for a long time. Pride, maybe. Or stubbornness. Or just exhaustion. I told myself as long as I stayed calm, as long as I didn't give them any ammo, things would level out. But this wasn't leveling out. It was escalating. I typed "family lawyer free consultation near me" and hit search. Names popped up, firms promising aggressive representation and protecting Father's rights. I didn't want aggressive. I wanted smart, patient, someone who understood that the loudest person in the room isn't always the victim. One listing stood out: small office, plain website, no flashy slogans. Just Colin family law, custody, visitation, modifications. I stared at the phone number for a long time, then dialed. A tired-sounding receptionist picked up first, then after a brief hold, another voice came on. Calm, measured. "This is Colin," he said. "How can I help you?" I took a breath. "I've got a question," I said. "Hypothetical for now. It's about a guy threatening to use the court system to cut a father out of his daughter's life." There was a pause on the other end. "Hypothetically," Collins said, "does this father have anything more than his word?" I looked at my phone screen, at the list of recordings and notes I'd built over the last few weeks. "Yeah," I said slowly. "Hypothetically, he does." "Then," Colin replied, voice sharpening just a little, "this might be a very different kind of conversation than the one that man thinks he's having." "Hypothetically, he does," I said, staring at the list of recordings like they were live grenades on my nightstand. There was a small pause on Colin's end, like he'd just sat up a little straighter. "All right," he said. "Then let's stop saying hypothetical. Come in tomorrow if you can. Bring whatever you have, texts, recordings, your custody order." I'll tell you exactly how bad this could get, and how bad it doesn't have to. His office was smaller than I expected. Strip mall, second floor, next to a nail salon and a tax place. Nothing about it screamed savior. But when I walked in, the air smelled like coffee and paper, and Colin looked like someone who'd forgotten to buy a new suit for a decade because he was too busy using the one he had. He shook my hand firmly. Mason? Yeah. I'm Colin, he said. Have a seat. I sat in the worn chair across from his cluttered desk. He didn't waste time with small talk. Start from the beginning, he said. But not the marriage. I don't need the romance novel version. Start from when this boyfriend entered the picture and things changed for your daughter. So I did. I told him about Hunter's comments, the way Violet's phone accidentally called me, the threats, the parking lot performance. I slid my phone across the desk and played the first recording, then the second, watching his face for any sign of surprise. He didn't emote much, just listened, occasionally jotting down a note, his jaw tightening here and there. When the recordings ended, the office felt too quiet. Well, he said finally, leaning back. The good news is, he's an idiot. I blinked. That's the good news? Yes, Collins said. Dangerous idiots are still idiots. Smart abusers don't make threats out loud, especially not in front of a minor. He does. Repeatedly. That's leverage. What about the bad news? I asked. He tapped the custody order in front of him. The bad news is, this setup is fragile. You agreed to this when you were tired and alone and just wanted it over. Primary custody with your ex, vague language about revisiting if circumstances change. That's a wide-open door for a guy like Hunter to walk through with a story about you being unstable. I exhaled slowly. So what does he need to do? File something. He needs your ex to sign her name under his narrative, Collins said. If he can convince her that you're a threat, or that limiting your time is protecting Violet, they can file to modify the order. They'll lean on your job, your past, anything that sounds scary in a courtroom. My past is sealed, I said automatically. Colin raised an eyebrow. Military. Yeah. Doesn't matter, he said. All they need is the word combat, and a sympathetic judge who's heard one too many stories about PTSD and episodes. They don't need facts. They need a believable fear. So what do we do? First, he said, we document everything. Which, to your credit, you've already started. Dates, times, what he said, how Violet reacted. Second, you do not, under any circumstances, give them what they're fishing for. You mean losing my temper? Exactly, he said. No raised voices in public. No aggressive texts. No threats, even half-joking. Assume every interaction is on camera, because it might as well be. I thought of the parking lot, of him practically begging me to shove him. I can handle that, I said. I believe you, Colin replied. But they're not just going to poke you. They're going to poke your kid, your pride, your history. You have to think like you're still in enemy territory. Only this time, the battlefield is paperwork and perception. I almost laughed at that, because he was closer to the truth than he knew. One more thing, he added. I need you to understand something uncomfortable. Right now, in the eyes of the court, you're the easier one to move. How's that? Your income is lower, your time with Violet is already limited, and you've got this vague military background they can stretch into whatever shape they want, he said. You are the piece they think they can slide off the board without too much noise. That means we have to become louder, but in the right way. What does that look like? Proactive, he said. We don't wait for them to file. We start a paper trail of concern about his behavior toward Violet. We document his threats. We request a review of the custody order based on emotional well-being, not just finances. You think that'll work? He shrugged. I think doing nothing definitely won't. Doing this gives us a shot. I left the office with a folder full of copies and a brain humming like it hadn't in years. The plan was simple on paper. Stay calm. Keep recording. Keep notes. Let Colin do the talking when it counted. Simple didn't mean easy. 2 weeks later, the other shoe dropped. A thick envelope arrived in my mailbox, my name printed too neatly on the front. Inside, a motion to modify custody. Attached, an affidavit signed by Brooke. I read the first paragraph 3 times. Concerns regarding Mason's emotional stability, history of combat service and potential trauma, recent erratic behavior including stalking and recording public interactions without consent. Stalking, I said out loud to my empty kitchen. They'd taken me standing in a parking lot, being humiliated in front of other parents, and turned it into stalking. They'd turned my one small line of defense, the recording, into a weapon they claimed I was pointing at them. At the bottom of the page, in Brooke's familiar handwriting, was her signature. I had seen that same curve of her name on birthday cards for Violet, on our mortgage papers, on our marriage license. Seeing it here felt like a final, official betrayal. I called Colin immediately. "Bring it in," he said. Today, when I sat back down in his office, he read the motion quickly, jaw working. "Okay," he said finally. "This is about what I expected, plus a little extra creativity." "They're calling me unstable," I said. "They're saying I'm scaring them." "They're trying to flip the script," he replied. Classic move. Abuser acts like the victim. Calm parent becomes the problem. But they made a mistake. What mistake? He held up the affidavit. They referenced the parking lot incident. Claimed you were aggressive and intimidating in front of other parents. You have a recording of that exact moment, correct? "Yeah." "Good," he said. "Because in your version, he's taunting you, belittling your job, making veiled threats about your visitation. Your behavior? Controlled. Calm. You walked away. Judges like evidence they can hit play on." I felt a tiny flicker of something that might have been hope. "What about the combat trauma line?" I asked. "That," Colin said carefully, "is where things get trickier. They're planting seeds. They don't have a diagnosis. They don't have an incident. Just words. If we ignore it, it festers. If we address it the right way, it can backfire on them." "How?" "By owning it before they twist it," he said. "You served. You left for your family. You chose a quieter life. We frame that as responsibility, not instability. We show your work record, your references, your lack of any violent history. And if they push too hard on it without evidence, they start looking like they're exploiting your service for leverage. Judges don't love that." I exhaled slowly. "What about Violet?" Colin's expression softened. "We request that her voice be heard carefully. Maybe through a guardian ad litem or therapist, not the battlefield of open court. If she can safely talk about how Hunter speaks to her, how he uses you as a threat, it changes the narrative. Is she going to have to pick sides?" He shook his head. "We're not asking her to pick a parent. We're asking the court to see which adult is actually protecting her." That night, when I called Violet, her voice was thin. "Mom says there's going to be another court thing," she said. "She says it's just to make things more structured. Hunter says you might not get as many weekends, but it's for my stability." Every word was a knife wrapped in bubble wrap. "I know about it," I said. "I talked to a lawyer. I'm not just sitting back this time." "Are you mad at Mom?" she whispered. I thought about Brooke's signature, the way she'd chosen comfort over truth more times than I could count. "I'm mad at the choices she's making," I said carefully. "But I'm not mad at you. None of this is your fault. You hear me?" "Yeah," she said softly. "Hunter says you're trying to make trouble." I almost laughed. "I'm trying to keep you safe," I said. "Sometimes that looks like trouble to people who are used to getting their way." On the other end of the line, a door closed. Voices murmured. She lowered her voice. "I turned the recorder on last night," she whispered. "He didn't see. I'll send it to you when I can." My heart clenched. "Only if you feel safe, okay? Nothing is worth you getting hurt over." "I know," she said. I don't like how he talks about you. I want someone to hear it the way I hear it." After we hung up, I sat in the dark, phone in my hand, envelope on the table, Colin's plan in my head. I'd spent years trying to disappear into a life so small no one would ever come looking for the man I used to be. But Hunter had decided to drag me into a different kind of war, one fought with affidavits and accusations. What he still didn't realize was that I'd survived worse battles than he could imagine, by staying patient, collected, and 3 steps ahead. And this time, the objective wasn't a building or a target. It was a 16-year-old girl who still called me dad, even when the world around her was trying to rename me as a problem. The recording from Violet came through 2 days later, in the middle of my shift. I was in the gym, sweeping up popcorn after a movie night, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost ignored it. Habit, but then I saw her name. No text, just an audio file. My heart dropped into my shoes. I slipped into the equipment closet, shut the door, and hit play. At first all I heard was TV noise. Then Hunter's voice cut through, low and sharp. "I'm done with this," he said. "You're not a little kid anymore, Violet. You don't need to be running to that man every time you get your feelings hurt." "I'm not running to him," she said, her voice small. "He's my dad." He scoffed. "He's a janitor with issues. You have no idea what he's done. You think he's some peaceful saint with a mop? Guys like him don't just wake up one day and decide to clean up after other people. They get put out to pasture because they're not fit for the real work anymore." Silence, then the sound of footsteps, closer. I could picture him looming over her. "You keep pushing this," he went on, "and I'll make sure he's nowhere near you. I will go into that courtroom and tell them everything I know, everything he tried to hide. You really want the judge hearing the word Delta next to your daddy's name?" My fingers tightened around the phone. Violet's voice came out shaky. "You don't even know what that means." "I know enough," he said. "I know what those guys did, who they went after. I know some people never forget. You think it's a coincidence your mom met me when she did?" My blood ran cold. "That doesn't even make sense," Violet said, trying to sound braver than she felt. "It makes perfect sense," he snapped. "Your dad made enemies. I know one of them. And if he keeps trying to play warrior in family court, I'll make sure every ugly thing he's ever done is dragged into the light. Judges love a good tragic soldier story. They'll eat it up and still take you away from him for your own safety." There was a rustle, like she was moving away. "You're scaring me," she whispered. "Good," he said. "Fear means you're listening. You want to keep seeing him? Then you shut up, you stop defending him, and you play nice when we go in front of that judge. You smile, you talk about stability, about routines, about how calm it is here. You do that, and maybe I don't bury him." The recording ended there. I stood in that tiny closet, mop propped against my shoulder, listening to my own breathing. For a moment, it was like I'd been dropped back into another life. Same cold voice promising destruction, same smug certainty they had the upper hand. Only this battlefield was my daughter's living room. I didn't text Violet back right away. I knew she'd be on edge, watching the door, listening for footsteps. Instead, I saved the file, backed it up 3 different ways, then called Colin. He picked up on the second ring. "Tell me you've got something," he said. "I've got more than something," I replied, and forwarded the recording. "Listen to this." I waited while he played it, the silence on his end stretching. When it stopped, he let out a long breath. "Well," he said, "if I was on the fence about pushing this into a full-blown hearing, I'm not anymore." "He's not just threatening to cut my time," I said. "He's talking like he's connected to my past, to people I put away." "You recognize the angle?" Colin asked. "Not yet," I said. "But nobody drops Delta like that by accident. He's fishing, or he's repeating something he heard from someone who knows more than they should. Either way," Colin said, "this helps us. He's explicitly tying your service to threats about your relationship with your daughter. That's not concern. That's leverage, and judges hate when kids are used as leverage." "He also admits he wants her scared," I added. "On tape." "Exactly," Colin said. "I'm filing this to the court with a motion for a guardian ad litem and a psychological evaluation of the home environment." His home environment. We're done playing defense. After I hung up, the old itch wouldn't go away. Not the anger, the curiosity. The tactical hum in the back of my brain that had kept me alive once. Hunter saying, "Your dad made enemies." I know one of them. There were only a few ways that could be true. That night, after my shift, I sat at the small kitchen table with a lukewarm cup of coffee and an old contact list I hadn't opened in years. Most of the numbers were dead, changed, or belonged to men who were trying to forget just as hard as I was. But there was one name I kept circling back to. Grant. We'd served together on more than one operation. Sharp, steady, the kind of guy you could hand your life to and not worry. Last I'd heard, he'd gone into some kind of federal work, gray area between law enforcement and intelligence. The type of job where you don't put your title on social media. I stared at his name for a long time before calling. When he answered, his voice was rougher, older, but still him. Mason. Yeah, I said. Been a while. That's one way to put it, he replied. You fall off the planet or just every map I had? Bit of both, I said. Listen, I wouldn't be calling if it wasn't important. The last time you said that, we ended up in a country that doesn't exist on paper, he said. So I'm listening. I gave him the short version. Divorce, janitor job, new boyfriend, threats, court. I didn't dress it up. I didn't have the energy. When I got to the part about Hunter saying he knew someone I'd gone after, Grant got quiet. What's his full name? He asked. Hunter. Rhodes, I said. At least that's what's on the paperwork I've seen. And you're in which state now? I told him. He whistled low. Sit tight, he said. I'll see what crosses my desk. If this is nothing, I'll tell you. If it's something, he exhaled. Well, then it's something. We hung up, and I sat there, staring at the dark window, my reflection floating over the parking lot lights. A few days later, just before the preliminary hearing, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Check your email. I opened my inbox and saw a single message with no subject line, just an attachment. No explanation, no names, just the document. I knew better than to ask for more. The file was a public record, nothing classified, just hard to find if you didn't know where to dig. It was a court case from years back, involving financial fraud, shell companies, and a man with a different name who, buried in the details, had a son listed as Hunter Rhodes, then a minor. The defendant's victim list included a contractor working for a federal task force, someone we'd extracted after a job went sideways. I remembered the op in flashes, heat, shouting, a man shoved into a helicopter while his life burned behind him. We'd gotten him out. The man who ruined him went away. If that man was Hunter's father, the math added up. I printed the file and took it straight to Colin. He read it twice, then sat back. So your ex's boyfriend likely grew up watching his father go down because of the kind of work you did, he said. And now he's dating a woman whose ex-husband just happens to be one of those men. Feels a little too poetic to be a coincidence, I said. Judges don't care about poetry, he replied. But they do care about motive. If we can show that this guy has a personal vendetta, that he's not just a concerned step-parent, but someone with an axe to grind, that changes how they see every move he's making. And can we show that? I asked. He tapped the file. We can try. We don't say, he's the son of a criminal you helped put away. We say, he has a history of proximity to fraudulent behavior, and now he's misrepresenting facts in this case, weaponizing your service and threatening a minor. We show a pattern, same tools, different battlefield. What about Brooke? I asked quietly. Does she even know who she's tied her life to? Colin shrugged. Maybe she does and doesn't care. Maybe she doesn't and is in over her head. Either way, that's not your job to untangle. Your job is to show the court one thing. When it comes to Violet, you are the adult in the room. The morning of the hearing, I stood outside the courthouse, watching people stream in, suits, uniforms, scared parents clutching folders to their chests like shields. Brooke arrived with Hunter at her side. She wore a blazer I'd never seen before, hair pulled back tight. He looked like he was walking into a business meeting, not a hearing about a teenager's life. Violet walked a few steps behind them. Dress she wouldn't have picked herself, shoulders drawn in. When she saw me, her face softened just a little, and I gave her the smallest nod I could. Inside, we took our places, me on one side with Colin, them on the other with their attorney. The judge walked in, robes swishing, face unreadable. Case of Mason versus Brooke regarding modification of custody, the clerk announced. I sat up straighter, feeling the weight of every choice that had led here pressing down on my shoulders. This wasn't my usual kind of mission. No gear, no team, no night sky. Just fluorescent lights, a wooden bench, and a room full of strangers who were about to decide how much of my daughter's life I was allowed to witness. The judge looked over the file, then at all of us. Let's begin, he said. Brooke's lawyer went first. Of course he did. He stood up, buttoned his jacket like he was about to sell something, and started talking about structure and stability and concern. If you just read the transcript without hearing the tone, you might think he cared about my daughter. Your Honor, he said, this is not about punishing Mr. Mason. This is about protecting Violet from emotional instability. My client has grave concerns about his behavior. Unsupervised recordings, unpredictable reactions, a history of combat service that, frankly, has never been properly evaluated. He let that word hang there, evaluated, like I was a broken machine that needed inspecting. Colin scribbled a note and slid it toward me. Let him talk. He's overplaying. Brooke's lawyer kept going. We have affidavits from neighbors who witnessed tense exchanges in public spaces. We have evidence that Mr. Mason has been secretly recording my client and her fiancé without their knowledge, which any reasonable person would find alarming. Combined with his admitted background in special operations, we submit that Violet's current schedule should be restricted for her safety. The judge looked over his glasses at me. Mr. Mason, you served in the military? Yes, Your Honor, I said. In what capacity? I felt the old fork in the road open up in front of me. For years I'd taken the same turn, vague, deflecting, burying. This time, Colin had told me, we go straight through. U.S. Army, I said. 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment. Most people call it Delta Force. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Hunter's lawyer had wanted that word spoken out loud, but not like this. The judge's eyes sharpened. How long did you serve? Long enough to know what happens when men with power think the rules don't apply to them, I said before I could stop myself. Then I cleared my throat. Multiple deployments. Honorable discharge. No disciplinary issues. Brooke's lawyer swooped back in. Your Honor, with respect, we have no way of knowing the psychological impact of that service. Mr. Mason has never undergone a formal evaluation in the context of his parenting. Exposure to combat, Colin stood. And yet, Your Honor, despite all this supposed danger, there is not a single police report, not a single complaint by any teacher, neighbor, or mandated reporter indicating that Violet has ever been unsafe in her father's care. He stepped forward, voice calm but carrying. Meanwhile, we do have clear, recorded evidence of threats being made to restrict her access to her father as punishment for normal teenage behavior. Threats not made by my client, but by the mother's fiancé. The judge held up a hand. One at a time. Mr. Colin, what recordings are you referring to? Colin lifted the small speaker we'd brought and set it on the table. With the court's permission, I'd like to play 2 short clips. Both were made with one-party consent, Mr. Mason or his minor child, legal in this jurisdiction. They directly contradict the narrative being presented in the motion. Brooke's lawyer started to object, then seemed to think better of it. Hunter shifted in his seat, jaw tight. Proceed, the judge said. Colin hit play. Hunter's voice filled the room. If you call your janitor daddy one more time, I swear I'll make sure you never see him again. I didn't look at him. I watched the judge instead. His face didn't move much, but his eyes did. Brooke stared at the table, cheeks burning. The first clip ended. Colin played the second. The living room conversation, Violet's shaking voice, Hunter's calm cruelty. Judges love a good tragic soldier story. I'll make sure every ugly thing he's ever done is dragged into the light. Maybe I don't bury him. When it stopped, you could have heard a pin drop. Colin let the silence sit for a few seconds before speaking. Your Honor, my client has been accused of stalking, instability, and intimidation. What you just heard is the man seeking to reduce his visitation, threatening a minor with the loss of her father as a form of control. That is not protection. That is emotional abuse. Brooke's lawyer cleared his throat. These are isolated, out-of-context moments. 2 moments, weeks apart, same pattern, Colin cut in. And they reference court strategy directly. We'll change the agreement. Judges love a tragic soldier story. This isn't concern. This is weaponization. The judge looked over at Brooke. Ms. Brooke, were you aware your fiancé was speaking to your daughter this way? She swallowed, eyes glassy. I didn't hear those exact words, Your Honor. He gets frustrated. He says things. I thought he was just trying to keep our home stable. Stable for whom? Colin asked quietly. The judge gave him a look, and he backed off a step. I will also note, Colin went on, that in their motion, they describe an incident in a school parking lot where my client allegedly behaved aggressively. We have a complete recording of that exchange as well. May I? The judge nodded. We played it. The fake friendliness, the digs about my job, the dare to make a scene. Then my voice, calm, measured. Are you done? I'm not wasting her weekend arguing in a parking lot. When it ended, the judge sighed, a long, tired sound. Mr. Mason, he said, why did you start recording these interactions? Because I've spent the last few years being told that my word doesn't carry as much weight as a man in a nicer suit, I said plainly. I knew if this ever came here, I couldn't walk in with just feelings. I needed the truth, exactly as it sounded to my daughter. The judge considered that. Then he turned to Hunter. Mr. Rhodes, please stand. Hunter rose slowly, face carefully neutral. Do you deny that it is your voice on these recordings? The judge asked. He glanced at his lawyer, then back. No, Your Honor. But those were private family moments. Taken out of context. What context, the judge asked, makes threatening to bury a child's father appropriate? Hunter's jaw flexed. I was trying to make her understand reality. He's unstable. He's dangerous. Based on what? Colin said. Any police reports? Any incident where he harmed her? Or just your interpretation of a past you don't actually know? Hunter's gaze slid toward me, and for the first time I saw it. Something like hatred, deep and old. Men like him ruin my family. He snapped before his lawyer could stop him. Guys who kick in doors and walk away while other people pick up the pieces. I know exactly what he is. Brooke turned to stare at him, confusion cutting through her shame. What are you talking about? He shut his mouth, too late. Colin lifted a thin folder. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to submit one more document into evidence. It's a public record involving Mr. Rhodes's father, who was convicted of financial crimes linked to a federal task force operation. Brooke's lawyer shot up. Objection. Irrelevant and prejudicial. Colin didn't even flinch. On the contrary, the motion before you paints my client as an irrational, unstable threat. We submit that Mr. Rhodes has a personal vendetta shaped by his father's conviction, and he is projecting that resentment onto Mr. Mason's entirely separate service. That goes directly to motive and credibility. The judge took the file, skimmed the highlighted lines. His eyebrows lifted just slightly. Did you disclose this history to Ms. Brooke? He asked Hunter. Hunter shifted. It has nothing to do with this. That's not what I asked, the judge said. Did you disclose it? Brooke's face went pale. You told me your dad had some business issues, she whispered. You never said he went to prison. You never said anything about a task force. Hunter's lawyer tugged his sleeve. Don't answer that, he muttered. The judge set the file down, exhaling. All right, we're going to take a brief recess. When we return, we will hear from the guardian ad litem regarding Violet's stated preferences and well-being. After that, I will issue a temporary order, pending a full evaluation. He looked at each of us in turn. I suggest everyone use this break to remember that the person at the center of this is a 16-year-old girl, not a proxy for old wounds. The gavel came down, and the room erupted into whispers. As I stood, I caught Brooke's eye. For the first time in a long time, I didn't see contempt there. I saw fear, confusion, and something that looked a lot like regret. She turned to Hunter, voice shaking. "What else didn't you tell me?" He didn't answer. For the first time since this started, I felt the balance in the room tilt. Not in my favor, not yet, but away from the certainty that I was the problem. Now it was up to the one person none of us deserved to put in this position, my daughter. They brought us back in about 20 minutes, but it felt like hours sitting there wondering what my little girl had just been asked in some side room I couldn't follow her into. I've kicked in doors without knowing what was on the other side, but waiting on that bench, staring at the wood grain, was somehow worse. The guardian ad litem, a woman named Morgan with tired eyes and a calm voice, took the stand first. She was the one who'd sat with Violet alone. No lawyers, no parents, just a notebook and a box of tissues between them. "I spoke with Violet twice," Morgan said. "Once in my office, once in each parent's home. She is a bright, loyal, and deeply torn 16-year-old. She didn't look at me or Brooke when she said that last part. She looked straight at the judge. Did she express fear of either household?" the judge asked. "Yes," Morgan said, "but not in the way this motion suggests." She opened her notes. "Violet reports feeling safe with her father." Her words were, "With Dad, it's quiet. Even when he's mad, he just talks. He never makes me feel like I'll lose him if I say the wrong thing." My throat tightened. I stared at my hands so I wouldn't completely fall apart in front of everyone. "In her mother's home," Morgan went on, "she reports feeling that love is conditional, on grades, on attitude, on how well she accepts her mother's fiancé. She used phrases like, 'I'm walking on eggshells, and if I defend my dad, the whole house turns cold.'" Brooke covered her mouth with her hand, eyes filling. Hunter just stared straight ahead, jaw locked. "Importantly," Morgan added, "Violet identified Mr. Rhodes as the primary source of her fear. She described him as controlling, loud without raising his voice, and said, 'He talks about my dad like he's nothing, and then tells me he can take him away whenever he wants.'" The judge glanced at the speaker we'd used for the recordings. "That is consistent with what the court has heard today." "Yes, Your Honor," Morgan said. "In my professional opinion, Mr. Mason is not the unstable party in this situation. If anything, he has shown restraint under provocation and an understanding that his daughter's well-being comes before his pride." "And your recommendation?" the judge asked. She took a breath. "That physical custody be modified in favor of Mr. Mason as primary residential parent, with liberal visitation to the mother, contingent upon her disengaging Mr. Rhodes from parental decision-making and cooperating with family counseling. I further recommend that Mr. Rhodes have no unsupervised contact with Violet, and that his presence not be required at any exchanges or court-related meetings concerning her." The room tilted for a second, like my brain couldn't quite process the words. "Primary residential parent." Colin put a hand on my arm under the table, grounding me. Brooke's lawyer jumped up. "Your Honor, this is an extreme recommendation based on a teenager's perception and recorded evidence," the judge cut in, "that your client's fiancé has yet to meaningfully refute." He turned to Brooke. "Ms. Brooke, you signed an affidavit claiming that Mr. Mason was aggressive, unstable, and a threat to your daughter. Having now heard these recordings, do you still stand by that characterization?" Brooke looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under her. I was scared," she said finally. "Not of him hurting her. Of losing what Hunter kept calling leverage." Tears spilled over. "He told me if we didn't get ahead of it, Mason would use his background to take Violet away, that judges always believe the soldier if you don't frame it first. I let him talk me into seeing my own daughter's father as a weapon instead of the man who changed his whole life to stay near her." She looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time in a long time there was no superiority in her eyes, just a raw, ugly regret. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." The judge nodded slowly, not letting her off the hook, but not beating her with it either. "Mr. Rhodes," he said, voice cooling, "this court is not the venue for you to exorcise your family history. Your fixation on Mr. Mason's service and your casual use of court as a threat toward a minor are deeply troubling. He shuffled the documents in front of him, then set them down with a finality that made my pulse pound. Here is the order of this court, he said. Effective immediately, primary physical custody of Violet is granted to Mr. Mason, with joint legal custody maintained between both parents. Ms. Brooke will have scheduled visitation, alternate weekends, and one weeknight, subject to completion of family counseling and with the requirement that Mr. Rhodes not be present during overnight stays. Brooke closed her eyes, a mix of pain and relief crossing her face. Mr. Rhodes, the judge continued, you are to have no unsupervised contact with Violet. Any future attempt to interfere with her relationship with either parent using threats, emotional manipulation, or misrepresentation to this court will be grounds for further restriction and potential contempt. He looked at all of us one last time. This is not about punishing adults for past choices, he said. This is about finally centering a child who has spent too long being used as a measuring stick for other people's pride. The gavel came down. Just like that, a judge in a county courthouse did what bullets and explosions never could. He made my knees weak. Outside, in the hallway, the air felt different. Lighter, somehow, even though my chest was so full I could barely breathe. Violet stood near the end of the corridor with Morgan, clutching a tissue. When she saw me, she didn't hesitate. She just ran. I caught her, arms wrapping around her shoulders, her face pressed into my chest. She was shaking, laughing, and crying at the same time. Did the judge? Yeah, I said, my voice breaking. You're coming home, kiddo. She leaned back enough to look at me, eyes shining. For real? Not just sometimes. For real, I said. You'll still see your mom. But you sleep at my place now. We figure out the rest from there. Brooke approached slowly, like she wasn't sure she was allowed in the frame. Morgan gave Violet's arm a gentle squeeze and stepped away, giving us space. I don't deserve a word from either of you, Brooke said quietly. But I need to say this anyway. She looked at our daughter first. I am so sorry I let someone talk to you that way in my house. I was so scared of losing standing, of going backwards, that I let you carry fear I should have taken on myself. Then she turned to me. You were right to leave that world, she said. And I was wrong to treat your choice like a flaw instead of a sacrifice. I didn't rush to comfort her. Forgiveness, in my experience, isn't a switch. It's a long, slow untying of knots. But I also wasn't interested in revenge. This isn't about us being okay, I said. This is about us being better for her. You want a second chance with Violet? You take the counseling seriously. You keep men who play games with courts and kids out of her life. You show up the way she needs, not the way you wish your life looked. Brooke nodded, tears spilling freely now. I will, she said. I swear I will. Hunter walked by then, flanked by his lawyer, eyes sliding over us like we were strangers in a waiting room. He didn't smirk this time. No threats, no little digs. Maybe it was the order the judge had just read, or the quiet word I knew Grant's people would eventually have with him about poking around in old, dangerous stories he didn't understand. Maybe it was realizing that for all his money and posture, he'd just lost the one thing he thought he could take from me. Either way, he walked out of that courthouse smaller than he'd walked in. Months passed. Life didn't magically turn into a movie, but it settled into something steady. I still pushed the mop down the school hallways at night. But now, at least twice a week, Violet was there in the afternoons, leaning against my cart, telling me about her classes. She'd help me stack chairs sometimes, earbuds in, humming to music only she could hear. One day, she stopped in front of the trophy case and stared at the reflection of us. Her in her hoodie, me in my faded polo with Mason on the tag. You know, she said, when he called you a janitor like it was an insult, that's when I knew something was wrong with him. Yeah, I asked. Yeah, she said. Because you being Delta or whatever, that's cool, I guess. But you being here, every day, that's what matters. Anyone can say they're a hero. Not everyone shows up to clean up after other people's messes. I laughed, a soft, disbelieving sound. That's one way to put it. She bumped my shoulder. You get what I mean. We didn't erase what happened. There were still hard conversations, therapy appointments, nights where she'd wake up from dreams where someone was telling her she was going to lose me. But the difference now was simple. When she reached for me, I was there. Not on a schedule somebody else could yank away. Not as a privilege to be earned. Just there. And funny enough, that quiet, consistent presence, that boring, small life I chose, is what finished the fight Hunter tried to start. So here's what I find myself wondering now, looking back on all of it. If someone mocked everything you'd sacrificed, threatened the one person you loved most, and tried to turn your own past into a weapon against you, would you ever truly forgive the people who stood beside him, or would you just learn to live with them for your child's sake? Let me know in the comments where you're watching this from. Your city, your country, your corner of the world, because these quiet battles over dignity and family are happening everywhere. And if this story hits something in you, gently tap that like button and subscribe in your own time. It tells me these stories matter, and it helps us keep sharing them without shouting for attention. Tell me down below what kind of stories you want to hear more of. Cheating spouse fallout, family betrayal, silent revenge that comes through courts and karma, or broken people trying to put themselves back together. Because I promise, I'll keep bringing you the kinds of stories your heart recognizes as real. Until we meet again in the next thriller, the next quiet but epic revenge story, take care of yourself and the people who actually show up for you. Those are the ones who turn out to be the real special forces in your life.